Have you ever stared at your screen, utterly paralyzed by the deafening, punishing silence of a man who was endlessly affectionate only yesterday? It is a uniquely suffocating pain, is it not? That visceral ache in your chest, the desperate, clawing urge to type out just one more paragraph so he might finally understand your worth. But here is the brutal, entirely counterintuitive truth that a manipulative man genuinely prays you never discover. The absolute only way to make him truly hear you is to stop speaking entirely. Paradoxically, denying him your words is the most deafening roar a woman can produce. Today, we are going completely off script. I am going to hand you 5 devastatingly elegant Stoic responses, the ultimate unspoken arsenal of the dark feminine that will instantly silence his manipulations, shatter his ego, and leave him utterly obsessed with the very woman he thought he could effortlessly break. Pay very close attention, my dear, because your days of begging for the bare minimum end the precise moment this video begins. Have you ever noticed how a certain type of manipulative man possesses an uncanny talent for pushing your precise emotional buttons? It is rather like watching a reckless child poke a sleeping lioness with a stick purely to see if she will roar. He will drop a subtle passive-aggressive remark over dinner or suddenly withdraw his affection for days, completely unprovoked. This sudden shift in his behavior is not clumsiness or a mere coincidence, my dear. It is a highly calculated performance. He is fishing for a reaction, desperately hoping you will shatter your own peace to give him exactly what he craves. When you inevitably send him a rather frantic 5-paragraph essay at 2 in the morning demanding to know what has changed, you are handing him the ultimate prize on a silver platter. He reads that message, sits back with a smug little smile, and suddenly he has the perfect excuse to deploy his favorite, terribly unoriginal word: crazy. By provoking you into a state of visible distress, he successfully shifts the spotlight away from his own abysmal behavior and firmly onto your justified yet weaponized emotional response. It is a masterful, albeit pathetic, sleight of hand. You must realize that your anger, your breathless phone calls, and your tearful explanations are the very oxygen that sustains his painfully fragile ego. A manipulative man does not feel powerful when you are calm, thriving, and perfectly centered. He feels powerful when he knows he can single-handedly orchestrate your emotional collapse. Your reactivity reassures him of his relevance in your world. Every time you lose your temper, you are essentially paying tribute to his significance, giving him the deep validation he is far too emotionally stunted to earn honestly. So the next time he attempts to bait you with a callous comment or a punishing bout of silence, I want you to severely disappoint him. Instead of defending yourself or staring at your phone waiting for a crumb of attention, pour yourself a rather large glass of Rioja, open a good book, and observe him with the detached curiosity of a scientist watching a particularly predictable lab rat. Embracing Dark Feminine Stoicism means recognizing that you are absolutely under no obligation to attend every cheap drama you're invited to. He is entirely expecting the explosion, the tears, and the barrage of messages that prove he still holds the reins to your heart. But to completely dismantle his game, you must first starve him of his preferred fuel and replace it with something he finds utterly terrifying. You see, the absolute most lethal counterattack to his petty provocations does not involve raising your voice or crafting the perfect insult. In fact, the real psychological warfare begins before you even open your mouth to utter a single syllable. When he finally drops his carefully crafted little provocation, your instinct will undoubtedly scream at you to defend yourself, to fill the air with immediate justifications. You must resist that urge with every fiber of your being. The most exquisite first response, the one that truly rattles a manipulative man's cage, is entirely non-verbal. It is the absolute mastery of physical stillness. Imagine his words hitting an invisible velvet wall. Instead of flinching or snapping back, you simply pause, breathe, and turn your undivided attention upon him. This is precisely where you deploy the Stoic Gaze. You look directly into the depths of his eyes, not with a furious, blazing glare, but with a profoundly empty, unblinking serenity. Look at him as if he has just spoken to you in a dead language, or perhaps suggested something utterly absurd like serving a fine Merlot with ice cubes. Your face must become an elegant mask of tranquil indifference, completely devoid of the panic or the defensive anxiety he is so desperately waiting to consume. Manipulators rely entirely on momentum. They throw the bait and expect you to lunge for it, so their frantic little dance can begin. By offering him absolutely nothing but a hollow, sustained gaze, you are violently pulling the rug out from beneath his performance. The silence stretching between you will rapidly begin to feel incredibly heavy to him, because he suddenly realizes he is standing alone on the stage. It is a rather brilliant, effortless psychological checkmate. Nature, as the proverb goes, abhors a vacuum, but an insecure man abhors a silent woman infinitely more. Because you refuse to provide the chaotic emotional noise he needs to hide his own flaws behind, his false confidence will begin to crumble. You will watch, likely highly amused, as he starts to squirm, perhaps nervously clearing his throat, hastily backpedaling to fill the excruciating void you have just created. He will inevitably end up babbling, handing you unprompted excuses and entirely undoing his own manipulation. You have effectively forced him to drown in the profound awkwardness of his own behavior, all without lifting a single manicured finger or raising your heart rate. It is quite a delightful thing to witness, I assure you. But what exactly do you do when the heavy silence finally breaks and he attempts to hand you a flimsy, half-baked excuse to save face? Well, you certainly don't argue with him. Instead, you take his pathetic little offering and reflect it right back, using a technique that is nothing short of devastating. So, the heavy silence has finally broken, and he now presents you with a truly spectacular half-hearted excuse for his recent negligence. Perhaps he claims his phone miraculously died for 3 consecutive days, or that his work was simply too demanding for him to manage a single text message over the weekend. When a man hands you an excuse that is this insulting to your intelligence, arguing or explaining why he is wrong is a dreadful waste of your precious energy. Instead, you are going to employ the mirror technique, holding up a flawless glass to his sheer absurdity and letting him argue with his own ridiculous logic. The secret to mastering this elegant technique lies entirely in your delivery. You must remain as exquisitely calm and analytically detached as a seasoned lawyer reviewing a particularly poorly drafted contract. When he finishes his little monologue of fabricated chaos, do not sigh, do not roll your eyes, and certainly do not let your voice tremble. Simply repeat his exact premise back to him, completely stripped of any emotion, summarizing his pathetic defense with absolute clarity. You are essentially translating his nonsense into plain English so that even he can hear how utterly foolish he sounds. For instance, let us say he has ignored you for days and blames his absence on being overwhelmed. Simply tilt your head, offer a small, polite smile, and say, "So, what you are telling me is that over the past 72 hours you couldn't find 10 spare seconds to send a simple message? I understand. That is all. You do not demand a groveling apology, nor do you attempt to convince him to treat you better. You just reflect the stark, embarrassing reality of his actions right back into his face. By repeating his incredibly poor excuse aloud, you instantly strip him of his plausible deniability. Manipulative men absolutely thrive in the murky waters of confusion, vague promises, and emotional fog, but the mirror technique forces them into the harsh, unforgiving light of day. When he hears his own inadequate behavior stated so plainly by you, he is backed into a rather tight corner. He must either admit that his excuse is complete rubbish or scramble to invent an even more embarrassing lie, whilst you remain entirely unaffected. He will suddenly realize that he is not dealing with a naive girl who can be easily pacified with cheap words, but a fiercely intelligent woman who sees right through his carefully constructed facade. It is a profoundly humbling experience for a man accustomed to getting his own way through endless gaslighting. However, there will inevitably be moments when his blatant disrespect is so absurd that even reflecting his words feels like too much effort. For those special occasions when his audacity reaches new heights, you will need to bypass the mirror entirely and reach for a devastatingly brief, polished weapon. There inevitably comes a juncture in dealing with a manipulative man where his audacity transcends mere excuses and ventures into the murky realm of blatant gaslighting. He might attempt to twist reality entirely, brazenly claiming an event never occurred or aggressively accusing you of overreacting to his own disrespect. In these moments of profound delusion, engaging in a lengthy debate to desperately defend your sanity is exactly the treacherous trap he wishes you to fall into. Instead, you must bypass the exhausting argument entirely and deploy what I call the velvet smile, accompanied by a devastatingly brief response. Your objective is not to win the battle of words, but to completely starve his ego of the chaotic friction it requires to survive. Think of his gaslighting as a rather tedious game of tennis. He forcefully serves a ridiculous accusation over the net, fully expecting you to aggressively volley it back. By simply refusing to swing your racket, the ball drops dead on the court, and the game abruptly ends, leaving him standing there looking rather foolish. This is precisely where your three-word arsenal becomes your most lethal psychological weapon in maintaining your dark feminine stoicism. Phrases such as, "That is unfortunate," or a perfectly measured, "I see," are exquisitely polite, yet they carry the sheer, unyielding weight of a heavy iron door slamming abruptly shut. You are acknowledging his utterance, but you are giving him absolutely nothing of substance to work with. Imagine he cancels a long-planned weekend arrangement at the 11th hour with a spectacularly flimsy text message, secretly hoping you will write an essay detailing your profound disappointment. Rather than giving him the supreme satisfaction of your tears, you simply reply, "That is a pity," and promptly head out for cocktails, leaving your phone in your handbag. This microscopic response is deeply unsettling to a man who thrives on emotional control, as it gracefully acknowledges his statement while completely dismissing his importance. It subtly communicates that his disappointing actions are noted, but they are entirely insufficient to disturb the tranquil waters of your universe. He is left utterly powerless, desperately clutching a script for an argument you flatly refuse to participate in. The true, unadulterated beauty of these highly polished three-word sentences is that they provide absolutely zero margins for a counterattack or a convoluted debate. If he suddenly accuses you of being unfeeling, cold, or distant because of your brief reply, another simple, unbothered "I understand" completely neutralizes his secondary attempt to bait your emotions. You are essentially constructing an impenetrable fortress of extreme politeness around your peace of mind, one that his manipulative tactics simply cannot breach, no matter how hard he tries. It is a brilliant, effortless display of emotional mastery, demonstrating that you see right through his pathetic little games without ever stooping to his level of chaos. However, whilst this highly polished three-word arsenal is remarkably effective at decisively shutting down his daily petty attempts at emotional manipulation, it is not a permanent cure for persistent disrespect. There are certain boundaries a man can cross where even the most devastatingly polite phrase feels entirely inadequate to address the severity of his poor behavior. When a man's conduct transitions from merely frustrating to undeniably toxic, engaging him at all, even with three elegant words, becomes an unacceptable compromise of your intrinsic worth. For those defining moments when the disrespect is absolute and unforgivable, you must ascend to the very pinnacle of Stoicism and execute a move so overwhelmingly powerful it requires no words at all.
At a certain point in your elegant journey, you will inevitably realize that engaging with his toxic behavior, even with the most perfectly crafted three-word sentences, is simply a waste of your exquisite energy. When a manipulative man repeatedly crosses your absolute boundaries, words, no matter how brilliantly delivered, completely lose their meaning and utility. It is in this precise moment of profound disappointment and absolute clarity that you must embrace the very highest echelon of Dark Feminine Stoicism. You must understand that you cannot negotiate your worth with a man who is actively committed to misunderstanding you. The ultimate response, therefore, is to entirely remove your presence from his reality, turning the tap of your attention completely dry. This is not the dramatic, emotionally charged exit of a woman desperately seeking to be chaste. This is the chillingly quiet departure of a woman who has genuinely lost interest in his tedious little circus. When you decide to execute the walkaway, you do not write a final vindictive message detailing his numerous failures, nor do you offer him a tearful parting explanation over a prolonged cup of coffee. You simply pack up your emotional investment, gather your dignity, and vanish from his life as completely and quietly as morning mist. It is a withdrawal so absolute and unannounced that it leaves him completely disoriented, abruptly stranded in the echoing void of your sudden, unexplained absence. The psychology behind this definitive silence is devastatingly effective against a man who relies heavily on your predictable reactions to consistently inflate his fragile ego. He anticipates the fight, the desperate bargaining, and the inevitable dramatic breakup text that allows him to cast himself as the misunderstood victim in his own heavily edited narrative. By denying him any form of closure or a final dramatic scene, you are effectively robbing him of his lines and turning the stage lights entirely black. He is left utterly alone with the harsh reality of his own actions, forced to slowly digest the deeply uncomfortable truth that his pathetic games have finally cost him his most prized audience. You see, my dear, your presence, your effortless laughter, and your unwavering support were always a highly valuable privilege, entirely contingent upon his continued respect and proper behavior. When he demonstrates beyond any shadow of a doubt that he is completely unworthy of that privilege, revoking it without warning is not an act of cruelty, it is an act of profound self-preservation. Imagine the look on his face when he reaches for his phone to casually ruin your Saturday evening, only to discover he has been elegantly and permanently blocked across all platforms. You are no longer a participant in his chaotic reality. You have simply ascended to a level where his petty manipulations can no longer even reach you. This ultimate silence is the loudest, most definitive lesson you could ever possibly teach a man of his profoundly flawed character. It unequivocally demonstrates that you value your own peace of mind far above the fleeting, chaotic dopamine hits of his entirely unpredictable affection. Leaving a manipulative man to drown in the deafening silence of your absence is the absolute purest manifestation of your dark feminine power, a majestic move that requires no justification or apology whatsoever. However, as you stand victorious in the beautiful, tranquil aftermath of your quiet departure, one crucial question remains about how you will navigate the newfound psychological space you have just reclaimed.
So, my dear, the power dynamic has now entirely shifted. The very moment you stop dancing to the exhausting rhythm of his provocations and embrace the profound stillness of the dark feminine, you become utterly untouchable. But I must ask you a rather provocative question, and I want you to be brutally honest with yourself in the comments below. Which of these 5 Stoic responses actually terrifies you the most to execute in real life, and why? Is it the suffocating silence of the Stoic gaze, or perhaps the sheer unapologetic finality of the walkaway? Confess it down below. I shall be reading your insights with great interest. If you are truly ready to stop being a mere casualty in these predictable psychological games and finally become the untouchable architect of your own romantic reality, then I formally invite you to subscribe to Destiny's Decree. Do ensure you tap that notification bell so you never miss a vital lesson in mastering the intricate psychology of relationships. Until our next session, remember, your peace of mind is an exceptionally exclusive club, and a manipulative man simply no longer meets the dress code.